So, Rena, we don't have to wear this the whole time.
Okay.
So I think what we'll do, Christina, is Rena and I will just start recording a conversation about Rena's background and your experience with lung cancer and what you would like people to know. And then we'll take questions at the end, okay?
Perfect.
These are air tube. These are supposed to be the healthier earphones, but they're kind of uncomfortable.
Oh, interesting. I'm going to learn about this.
Okay, so Rena and I are good friends from our children's school.
Mm-hmm.
You have two beautiful kids, and your story is one I think is so important more people know about. So I know you as a very health conscious person.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I first met you, I just remember you holding a cold pressed green juice in your workout gear.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us more about your background and whether you had risk factors for lung cancer and how you came to feel like you should get tested.
Okay. My background is I had a mother and grandmother that both died of cancer in their 50s. So my mother died at 53 of lung cancer. So I guess that was genetically maybe in my background, even though she was a smoker. And my grandmother had breast cancer at 57, but it was postmenopausal, which I think they say is not hereditary. As you know, I did dabble in smoking in college, like I think a lot of us did back in the day. Not a lot of us, but some of us, I should say. And but I have, after my mom having cancer, it was definitely not something I was going to ever continue with, and it was never a big thing for me. I got really into running when I was about 22, I think. So, and that's kind of the start of my athletic. I was a dancer when I was younger, and I really started getting into athletics and taking care of myself. And my dad has always been one of those people that were feeding us wheat germ as little kids. And then it was garlic pills and, whatever it was, like the new phase of health. He always had us buying into it. So it was definitely.
Dad was really health conscious.
Very health conscious. And you've met my dad. He's 80 and he looks like he's about 50. And he still does yoga with me. He's very health conscious. So I'm always reading books on, new ways to keep your body clean. And I do my annual cleanses or biannual cleanses and all that kind of healthy stuff, especially living in New York, trying to balance the kind of the crazy lives that we have here. And however, as I was approaching my 50s, a lot of people get very excited about celebrating their 50th birthday. And
excited is one emotion. Mixed emotions.
And I definitely had a lot of friends who were very excited about their 50th birthdays. And they kept saying, "Are you going to have a party? You have to have a party. Oh my God, it's such a great birthday milestone." And I said, it's very odd, but my mom and my grandmother, and not to be dark, but they both died in their 50s, and a reality hit me. And I thought, well, if I have their genes, I could have a very challenging decade. So I also do love a medical test, though. So when I've always been one of those people that if there's a new medical test that could give you any sort of information about anything, your genetic makeup, your possibilities of catching something, I would ask the doctor for it. Like I asked for a blood test that's, I think it's called CA-125. That is a simple blood test that I make my OBGYN give me that is a marker for ovarian cancer, because I lost a friend to ovarian cancer at a very young age. And she had very young children. And, it's a very volatile test. There's a lot of what do you call those?
False positives.
False positives, and they don't like to give it. But I always wanted to be given that test, and my OBGYN was also a big believer in some medical tests, so he would let me have them. And of course, one time it came back and it was high, and so that I had to go back every 6 months and get one, and it progressively went down. So it never turned into anything. But I thought, my grandmother had breast cancer. It's tied to ovarian cancer. I didn't have the BRCA gene. I did test for that. I did test for a lot of things. But I just have been surrounded by a lot of cancer. As you know, we have a mutual friend that's a person that has childhood cancer. So I definitely felt cancer was in my world for some reason. I don't know why. But
well, it's more prevalent than ever.
Yes, I think so. And I think, you know, literally know 3 people that spend time at Memorial Sloan Kettering. So I think I've been in and out of that hospital, giving blood, donating blood for a friend of mine that had lymphoma. So it is, something that was in my kind of back of my mind. And as you know, we have advertisements on the back of our bus stop signs. And I kept seeing these public service announcements that kept saying, if you've ever smoked or been exposed to secondhand smoke, ask your doctor about the new lung cancer screening. But as you know, it's not really a new screening, as I've told you. It's just a low-grade CT scan, which is really such an amazing test. I know there'd be some doctors that would say, well, why would you expose yourself to radiation if not necessary? However, because it's a low-dose CT scan, radiation levels, I think it's a, you know, I think you have to balance whether you want that in your life. But for me, I immediately wanted to sign up for that test. Because
and what was your doctor's response?
So it's interesting because she thought at first,
because you're like 49 at this point.
Yes, okay. And she, or maybe it was 50, 49, 50. It was right around my birthday, and she did not immediately dismiss me. She actually thought about it and she said, well, it's technically not a real screening test. And I said, well, why is that? She said, because we wouldn't give it to you on a regular basis like you do a mammogram, because we wouldn't expose you to that much radiation on a regular basis, like an annual basis. And I said, well, let's do it biannually. And she said, well, even then, you know, cancer can develop within that time period. And I said, I would still rather know if I had lung cancer, you know, sooner, because usually a lot of the lung cancers, and I shouldn't say all of them, but often some are very slow growing, like the one I had, which is one of the most popular lung cancers, adenocarcinoma. It's usually a much slower growing lung cancer. So I probably had lung cancer for a couple years and with no symptoms whatsoever. So I said to her, I'd still rather take those statistics and get my CT scan. And I said, you know, it's the only known test that shows whether someone has lung cancer. So in my case, like, who knows? And she's like, well, there's not a lot of genetic links to lung cancer, which it's true, it's not proven genetic links, but clearly in my case, I think mine was very genetic, even though they still can't prove that it was genetic. So I pushed for my CT scan. And she said, well, why don't you just go downstairs today in her building? They have the x-ray office. She said, go down today and they'll give you a chest x-ray today. And that doesn't happen in New York. You usually have to set up another appointment and go. And I said, fine, I'll at least go get the chest x-ray. And I knew x-rays have a lot less radiation, yes. So I went downstairs and she called me, again, I was very impressed with her because she called me within an hour. So I left her office, got an x-ray, chest x-ray, because she wanted it as like a baseline. And she said, let's just get a baseline chest x-ray. If there's anything on it, obviously, I'll let you know. And she called me and she said, I see something on your chest x-ray, not probably the radiologist, and I don't like the way it looks. So I'm going to set up a meeting with you to have a meeting with the pulmonologist. And then also you're going to get your CT scan after all. So I said, well, where do I get the CT scan? How do I get it? So on and so forth. So another facility does the CT scans and I call them to set up the appointment. I get the appointment. And then I have something with the insurance company. They didn't want to pay for it. They needed 48 hours to pay for it. And I was just on the phone with the insurance company. I said, no, you are paying for it and I'm going tomorrow. Like, you need to figure it out. And sure enough, like, my doctor talked to them, whatever happened, and I got the CT scan the next day. I was lucky though, because I've done a lot of, I've been involved with Memorial Sloan Kettering, that someone there who's a friend, it's a doctor, decided to look at my scans within a couple days. And she too also didn't like the way it looked. So I guess the way tumors look, often they use a term called spiculated, and it looks spiculated. So
What does that mean?
I think it like means spikes, like coming out of like, and if you see on the x-rays, often it literally looks like something that is exploding in a way.
So why would doctors not?
I think that is a sign of like a cancer tumor. It shows some sort of like, it's not a normal mass, I guess. So, and then hence, you know, the start of the biopsies, and I can get into all that if you want me to. But so I just think I had some sort of sense to be my biggest advocate. And I also had some sort of weird sixth sense that told me, that was giving me signals to go push to get that checked. And being that they don't know that much about lung cancer and their genetic links, you know, I'm glad now I know this, but at the time I didn't. But I'm glad I said, you know, I don't care that my mom was a smoker. You know, how do you know it couldn't be genetically linked? And sure enough, my mom died at 53. By the time she was diagnosed at 52, it was already stage 4.
Wow.
So she only survived for 10 months. The chances are she probably had a similar cancer, and she probably had it for a couple of years. So if you do the math, it's exactly the same timeline as I have. So I really feel like there has to be a genetic link. It just doesn't make any sense.
It's not proven yet. That
not proven
surprises
yet.
me.
No, they just haven't. So my oncologist said, we will probably figure this out down the road, that it was genetically linked, but we don't have it. It's not proven now.
Well, there are a lot of things that are true and not yet proven.
Right.
What surprises me, which I only learned through you, is that lung cancer is the #1 cause of cancer death in the US.
Men and women.
Both men and women. I had no idea.
No one knows, because it's been stigmatized as a smoker's cancer. 60% of the people that are diagnosed with lung cancer no longer smoke or have never smoked. So if you combine 20% have never smoked, then if you combine the other 40%, it's people that maybe have smoked like me. I smoked in college 30 years ago. So it's people that technically have their lungs are supposedly reversed and cleaned, and you know, you can reverse a lot of lung damage if you stop smoking. So it's really people, you know, what triggered that, I don't know. I mean, my surgeon said to me, there's probably a good chance that it was triggered by our environment, because living in New York, they have a much higher rate of lung cancer here than they do in like Utah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
from the air pollution? Air pollution,
yes. So that they have proven. So there's a good chance of that. That's why I'm so thankful for you and helping me help clean my inside air of our apartment, and adding the air filtration systems, and just paying attention to the kind of air quality that I was breathing. Now, walking down the street every day, I really can't get away from what we endure here, but I do think
indoor air pollution is so important, because even just your bedroom, that's generally 1/3 of your life.
And I have my air filtration right next to me, so if I can help prevent it, and I'm doing a lot of things to try to help prevent a recurrence. I was lucky, as you know, I had stage 1B. So the mass was very small, and it was in my lower right lung. So they were able to remove a lobe. I think it was my lower. Now I keep confusing if it was my upper. Anyways, it's the side that had 3 lobes. They were able to take 1 lobe out. It's called a lobectomy, and they they do it much more civilized now. They slice down your side, and they kind of squeeze open your ribs, and they pull the lung out. And my surgeon was a big believer of like, just let's get let's get the whole lobe, because we're not sure if like in a complete, sometimes people get a section of their lobe taken out, but they're not sure how much of that lobe actually regenerates and actually works, because your lungs have 5 different compartments, and they can do a lot, the other 4. So supposedly I have a little bit less capacity. I have like 15% less capacity.
Have you noticed it?
It's hard to say because I had to take a good amount of time off of cardio exercise, even though they don't really want you to, but in your mind you go through a lot.
Yeah.
So I just was very scared first of all, it hurts for the first month, and then you're going through pretty intensive surgery. I didn't realize internal surgery takes so long to heal. It's not like I felt terrible after. I mean, for the first week, yes, and then after that I was very tired, but it just takes your body a long time to heal internally, so you have no idea. So then,
like, how long do you feel it
I mean,
before you felt more back to normal?
It took a while. Like, it took at least 3 months before I kind of felt a big hump. You know, like it was almost like 3 months I was here, or 6 months I was here. A year I felt tremendously different. Like, now I feel almost myself, my old self, but my cardio is still not great. But it's just because I haven't been doing it regularly. I think I'm getting back into it now and doing it regularly. And so as long as I just I'll let you know in a few months if I feel a lot different. I never was great at cardio though. So I always had a little bit of asthma, and I was just never really strong at it. And I wonder if there's correlation with, I never had the strongest lungs in the world. So was there some correlation?
Asthma too?
Yeah. And there is a higher correlation with people that have asthma to lung cancer, a slightly higher correlation. But what's interesting to me is all the community of people I've met, of especially young women. For some reason on Instagram, I follow #lung cancer or living with lung cancer, a bunch of different ones. And women are probably take up more social media anyways, have a bigger social media presence. But I find all these young women with young children or no children that are being diagnosed with lung cancer in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s. And it's mind-blowing to me. And they often talk about not being smokers because I think there's a real shock to people that they don't understand, that everybody can get lung cancer. Anybody can get lung cancer. I met a woman at the walk in Brooklyn 2 weeks ago for lung cancer, 32 years old, doesn't run in her family. She's never smoked a day in her life. And she just was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer.
I wonder though, for every smoker, there are multiple people affected by the secondhand smoke.
Right.
Do you think
I didn't ask her if she was exposed to secondhand smoke. It could be.
Well, I know when I was pregnant, when I have been pregnant, walking down the sidewalks of Manhattan, I've been so angry that I don't have the right to fresh air without secondhand smoke.
Right.
Like, I was so much more sensitive to all the smokers on the sidewalks. And
right.
I
hold my breath literally when I walk by now.
I know, and I tell my children too also.
Yeah.
And when they cross behind a car that is stopped.
And even this morning, we seem to walk every day, and the street cleaners come by. And it literally is always on our side of the sidewalk, and the street cleaners coming in and it's brushing up all that toxic stuff, whatever. Right. And Reina and I always hold our mouth and hold our face because I'm just so sensitive to everywhere now. If I'm behind a bus,
have you become more sensitive?
Very. I've been.
Is it psychological?
Of course, yeah.
So it's not like you feel it more in your life.
No, it's psychological. I mean, or I'm trying to just be as healthy as possible.
Yeah. And
trying to avoid. I mean, part of me is like, should I have been wearing one of those masks around? But I'm not going to do
that. If you do it, maybe I'll join you. I, in thinking about today, was remembering more when I waitressed in college in a cafe that was considered so cool. It was very European, but there was smoking in the cafes. And I remember there was a time where restaurants in New York had lots of indoor smoking.
Right.
And when I did move to LA for a period, for like 2 years, one thing I loved so much about LA is that there's no smoking indoors was banned.
Right.
I craved it so much that if I went to a restaurant, I didn't have to inhale smoke.
Right.
But because of your story, I've wondered, maybe I should get tested because I was
It's
around
actually
so much secondhand smoke.
higher correlation to women with an Asian background.
Interesting.
They don't know why. And I think I would assume, and I have to find out more about this, is it's global. So I'm wondering if it's due to like pollution in China or
Right.
specifically that region where there's a lot of air pollution. But they just said it's on the rise for young women and young women with Asian backgrounds.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Genetically.
Yeah. Well, we all have unique vulnerabilities, both individually and also as men and women, children and adults,
right.
and I'm sure ethnicities.
Right.
So,
or where you live, probably.
And where you live.
Right.
So, do you happen to know in terms of the radiation from this low grade CT scan, is it comparable to a mammogram? Do you know?
That would be a great question. I can follow up with and find out.
I can ask my doctor too.
I don't, but what was funny is when you're in the hospital and after you have your lobectomy, they check you so often to see how much fluid you still have in your lungs, because they need to make sure the fluid's leaving your body. So you get an x-ray either once or twice a day. I think I got a CT scan every couple days. I mean, the amount of radiation, especially the x-rays that they gave me, and I know x-rays don't have as much as CT scans, but I was in awe. I said, oh my God, I remember my practitioner saying, oh, we wouldn't want to expose you to all that radiation by me asking for one CT scan. Then when you're actually in the hospital, they're just using it like it's nothing. And I said that to my surgeon. I'm like, I keep getting bombarded with radiation. And he said, in the big scheme of things, that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So he's like, by the time that catches up to you, you'll be old.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, I don't know who I believe here, but I thought it was interesting how one, they in the big scheme of things, they just didn't think it was that important. Whereas your general doctor says, oh no, we wouldn't want to do that. So I have to find out more about that. Mm-hmm. And I have brought that up to both doctors again, and they just kind of shrug it off and don't really have enough information.
I think in general, doctors don't have enough information. No one does. I don't really think anyone studies it, because there's certain situations in an emergency when you're trying to save a life, prolong a life.
Right.
You just need to get the imaging done.
Right.
And so no one really studies where the long-term effects.
Right.
And it's complex because you're so healthy in every other aspect.
Right.
It's just impossible to really study human beings and how this will affect them. There's so many variables.
Right.
What have you learned that you wish you knew sooner about the things you can control, like the environmental or lifestyle factors you can control? I mean, we all know about smoking now and secondhand smoke, but were you surprised to learn, like I know we talked about indoor air generally being 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air?
That was shocking to me when you told me that. And I know you had, either it was in your book, or I know I had heard it before from you, but it just didn't register. And when you told me that after I got out of the hospital, I was, very panicked. I was thinking, oh my God, in my own home, I'm breathing in toxic air. And I had no idea my kids are breathing it in, which was really heartbreaking. So I remember constantly, and we do this now every day, we try to open windows every day in the house and get fresh air. And I got everybody on board with that. Like my kids are opening their windows, so everyone's getting some fresh air in the house. The cleaning supplies too, for me, was pretty interesting. Now I had transitioned on some things just because you see the name organic and less toxic, and you immediately gravitate to the labeling. But I didn't really know that there was a service out there like EWG, where you can actually, EWG.org, where you can log in your actual cleaning product and it gets a rating and it tells you what actual products, what
the hazard score.
Yeah, and what it's made out of, and like what causes this thing is proven to cause cancer, and this ingredient is proven to be what is it, endocrine disruptor.
Endocrine disruptor, yeah. And carcinogens and neurotoxins and reproductive. I mean, it's
but
sobering.
They actually explain it all, which is fascinating. It's not just a generic grade. It's fascinating how they explain it all. So that to me was, I mean, I remember 2 days just on that website going through all our cleaning supplies, and then your advice on some of them that you had already, done all the legwork on, but you also, I know, do more of a really clean cleaning product with your vinegar and yes, which I haven't transitioned to completely yet, but I will.
It took me many years to get to the point where we create our own cleaning recipes.
Right, that I want to do next.
It took many years.
Right, that I want to do next. It's but the stuff that we're using all got an A grade, so at least I feel that
that's great.
We changed our dishwashing detergent, the stuff we wash our clothes with. I mean, everything.
What was your emotional?
I stopped using candles.
Great.
Yeah.
And do you ventilate?
I love candles.
Well, even just cutting down on how often you use it is good. And if you are going to use it for like a dinner party or Thanksgiving dinner, just if it makes you that happy, you can do it and then just air out the home.
Right.
Crack open your windows. So.
And I don't even think there are any candles that are really good to breathe in.
Well, anytime you burn something, you're creating other fumes or small particles.
Okay.
So it's always a risk. And really, do we fully understand? But in general, the healthier candles are 100% beeswax. And the wick is organic cotton.
Right.
That's the best option, but it's probably better to not burn anything.
Right.
But of course, sometimes for a special occasion, you'll burn them. My husband still burns them sometimes, and I air out the home after.
Right.
But
it's hard when you start to concentrate on all of this. But I think one of the most important things people have to remember is if you're not breathing in oxygen, you probably shouldn't be breathing it in. Like it is, like the doctor actually we talked about this, like, because I was concerned with the whole vaping epidemic, having a 15-year-old. And he started high school last year, and his reaction to coming back home after a couple days of school, and he said, "Oh my God, Mom, everybody is vaping." And it was, I think, part of the rite of passage of these kids, like smoking was for us, to show that they are cool.
Right. And
he said, oh, well, and I explained to him, anything that you put into your lungs is bad. And they think they have some sort of knowledge about vaping and how it's not unhealthy for you, and it's not a cigarette, and it's chemicals. You're breathing in chemicals that are not supposed to be in your lungs.
Yeah.
As my doctor said, unless it's oxygen, it's going to cause problems. And now, sure enough, now it's all over the news, the problems it's causing, which is, I mean, I think it's as bad as cancer. These kids are just, they don't even know how to handle it. So I'm hoping that something drastically happens with the vaping industry, because it is really unbelievable that people don't realize that if you're not inhaling oxygen, you're doing damage to your lungs.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that, I mean, your lungs are such a vital part of your survival.
Do you feel like you've learned interesting things about recovery and resiliency?
Let's see.
It's interesting to me that studies on heavy cigarette smokers find that like 24% of male heavy smokers die of lung cancer. And for women, it's about 18%. And heavy smokers is defined as 25 cigarettes a day.
A pack a day, yeah.
Yeah. Is that a pack?
Is it pack 20? Yeah, I think it was 20. I don't know. I don't remember.
But when I read that, I thought, wow, that's kind of low. And of course, heavy smokers get other things. It's not necessarily lung cancer.
Right.
But I was just surprised because I know there have been, what is it? It's like 600 ingredients in cigarettes. Mm-hmm. When you burn it, it creates 7,000.
Oh.
And 69 to 70 are known to cause cancer. So inhaling these carcinogens only 24% of men and 18% of women
Yeah,
die of lung cancer. So that's so interesting to me because I think, well, what about the people who didn't get sick? What are they doing?
Right. Well, I think that was also, I remember my mom always saying that, oh, I have, because we used to bug her as kids, Mom, you have to quit smoking. She had a really bad cough all the time.
Did she smoke at home?
Yes, in the car at home. And I said to her, you know, she had this really bad cough. And I said, you're either going to die of cancer or you're going to die of emphysema. And she would come back with, oh, my grandfather, this person, you know, family members, they smoked until they were 90 and never got cancer. And back then the marketing from these cigarette companies were saying it's not bad for you, which we all know they had to pay deeply for. But she really believed that there are plenty of people that didn't get lung cancer, so it wasn't necessarily correlated. And I think people think lung cancer is really a smoker's disease. And, you know, based on the statistics I'm starting to see and learn and the people that I'm meeting, I think it's going to, people just don't understand that it's not just a lung cancer. I mean, it's not just a smoker's disease. It's really affecting anybody who has lungs. And and again, all these people I follow on Instagram now that I've become friends with, it's just unbelievable. They're young, never smoked, and you know, have had no symptoms. Often they go in. A woman, Kitty, that I met this summer, she went in because she was having shoulder pain, and she knew to go in because her sister had lung cancer and died of it. Her oldest sister, but her parents had, I think, 4 or 5 kids, and her oldest sister was much older than her. So she didn't really, back then they didn't talk too much about what the lung cancer was. So she didn't know exactly what had happened. Eventually it moved into her bones and she ended up metastasizing and passing away from that.
Was it related to her shoulder pain?
It was. So when she went in to ask about her shoulder pain, she just knew in the back of her head, I better just get this checked out. My sister had lung cancer. And sure enough, she had early stage 2. She had stage 1 lung cancer. So her story is almost exactly like mine. She had some inkling of a feeling. She went in and she had a much even less aggressive surgery than I did. They just did a segment. They took a segment. They took the tumor out and took a segment, and she's doing great. But she came and did the lung cancer walk with me this summer. She lives in California, and she came out to New York and did that. So it's interesting, but most people don't find it until stage 4, and that's often when it metastasizes and they feel it in a different area. So I talked to someone this week that I met through a parent at school, and she said she was having hip pain. She also never smoked. She is probably in her early 50s, and she was having hip pain. And when they found it, she had lung cancer metastasized all over. She lived above a dry cleaner in her building who was not venting properly for years. They eventually kicked the dry cleaner out, but they found out later it was all coming through the vents in the building.
Oh, wow.
So she really believes hers was caused by, and she actually named the chemical and what it was. Yeah. I don't know, I can't remember what it was, but so she's really thinks that. She has been lucky though, and there are often there's people that are getting diagnosed with certain gene mutations of lung cancer. They have, I know 2 that are the major ones that they've kind of been able to pull out and learn more about. I think there's other ones that they're working on, or maybe there are more. But one's called ALK and the other one's called EGFR. And there's actually targeted therapies for those people that have those lung cancers. They take a drug. It's not a chemotherapy. It's not an immunotherapy. It's a targeted therapy where they actually take medicine that suppresses the cancer. So people are living with stage 4 cancer now, lung cancer, which is amazing. It doesn't cure it. It suppresses it. So the way I was explained, it works almost like an antibiotic. Sometimes the antibiotic can work for a very long time. People have been on some of these drugs for 6+ years. And it's because they're fairly new, they don't know how long that they'll work. Often, sometimes they'll stop working, almost like an antibiotic can, because the cancer can outsmart it and mutate differently. But then there's other drugs that you can kind of complement with the first drug, And often like people will do a series of different drugs and sometimes even come back to the original drug. So there's a lot of new things happening. Like more drugs have been approved in lung cancer over the last 3 years than had been in the last 20.
So are treatments and science advancing pretty quickly?
Huge. It's like I don't know, finally people are realizing, oh, it's the #1 cancer. Let's put our energies towards curing this cancer.
So it's more than like breast cancer and which others? There was a
prostate, ovarian, uterine combined. So there's more cancer.
So there are
more lung cancer cases than all those combined.
So is there more research dollars going into lung cancer?
It's one of the most underfunded.
Because no one really talks about it.
And they don't get the government support that like breast cancer gets. Now, I really feel like it's going to change. I mean, we are working, as you know, I joined an organization called the Lung Cancer Research Foundation. And it's a national organization solely funding, 100% funding research. So not a lot of patient outreach, not a lot of, public service announcements, things like you'll see with like other organizations. Ours is truly to try to find a cure. So we're finding we're getting much more people interested in participating in those kind of charities. And also we're finding drug companies want to work with us.
Great.
Because they want to see the research being done also, because it helps them actually in their research.
That's great.
Yeah, so that's been great. Like we partnered with Pfizer on something. So it's moving towards that direction, but it's still super underfunded. But it's getting there.
And so why don't you talk about the luncheon you have coming up and how people can contribute?
Okay. Well, Lung Cancer Research Foundation is a national organization. We merged with another charity called Free to Breathe. So we do a couple of ways. There's a couple of ways that we fundraise. Often they're done with walks all over the country. And sometimes they're called Strides for Life. Sometimes they're called Free to Breathe. But we just had one in Philadelphia this past Sunday. We had one in Brooklyn 2 weeks before that. We had one in New York over the summer, in the Hamptons in the summer. I'm trying to remember where the next one is. Oh, the Chicago one a month ago. So
where can someone learn more about when they
they can go to lungcancerresearchfoundation.org, or we actually have a new IRL, which is ifyouhavelungs.org, which I love that one because it's true. So you can learn more about all the events, and you can create your own event, which is pretty exciting. So say you live in San Francisco and you really want to do a walk there because there's someone that you care about that has been affected by lung cancer, or you think it's something that's underfunded, you could start your own walk. You can do a yoga event. You can it's very grassroots in that way. And again, 100% of the money goes to research. And then we have a scientific board that decides based on the grants that they have applications for. So for instance, I think we get about 300 grant applications a year. And I think there's about 125 of them it gets immediately narrowed down to. And I would say 30 of them a year we would love to fund, maybe even 50. I mean, they are really good research applications. However, we only have the ability to fund no more than 10 a year. I mean, this year we're actually even funding a little bit less. I think we're doing 9 maybe. And it's so frustrating to me because when I hear the head of the scientific board talk about the really amazing opportunities to see things move faster in this whole sector and try to find a cure for lung cancer, when you see all these people have ideas and they can't do it because they can't afford to do the research. They have their medical school bills to pay, and they can't, or because often the places that they work can't fully fund them, so they need these grants to be funded. So it's frustrating, but we're getting there, as we said. So we have a big luncheon that we do annually as a fundraising event. But what I love about it, which you're going to come to, it's on November 12th in New York City. It's being held at the Pierre, and it's really research focused. So we actually bring researchers in, people that were past grantees, often talk about what they have learned about lung cancer. Our chair of our board is a really amazing thoracic surgeon at Weill Cornell. His dad passed away from lung cancer. So that was, I think, what got him into the field, actually. He was so passionate about making a difference. And that's where we're going to do a lot of fundraising that day. And I'm actually speaking at the event, which I'm kind of terrified about. But
are you getting more comfortable?
Yeah, I think I'm getting more comfortable. I mean, a lot of, I just will tell my story, and I think people will be interested in that. I definitely feel very lucky to have, removed the cancer out of my body and be able to talk about it in such a positive way. I think it would be hard to talk about it if I was still fighting the battle. I mean, I think, I think it's a little bit easier for me to talk about now because I feel like it's a little bit more, even though I have to have scans every 6 months and we'll have to have a scan for the rest of my life regularly. I think it moves out to a year in a couple years, but I do feel in my mind that it's like it's in the past and I'm doing something else. And this is like, I'm doing something for the future of lung cancer that has nothing to do with me. So I've kind of removed myself from feeling like a patient.
Well, you're such a gift to not just those affected by lung cancer, but to everyone, because as you said, if you have lungs,
right,
you are at risk. And for you to bring awareness to such a prevalent issue that most people, it was not on my radar, and I am very health conscious. So you really, what you're doing is so wonderful. And so maybe someone up there was, thinking Reina could really make a big impact.
I hope so. That's my goal.
Definitely.
Even if I can help one person, whether it's having access to the right doctor or getting a second opinion, or I don't know, learning more about how they can help the future of lung cancer, whatever it is. I've talked to people about what to expect during surgery. So anything that I can do to help is, for me, I really want to, put myself out there to be that advocate for people.
Well, because of you, I'm definitely going to talk to my doctor during my next visit about your story and the fact that I waitressed in a smoke-infused cafe during college. So I think if anyone listening has been around a lot of secondhand smoke or just environments that had lots of fumes, to just talk to your doctor about whether it would make sense for you to get tested.
Like dry cleaners. I think of all the people from 9/11 and their exposure to the toxins that they were exposed to, and often a lot of those
firefighters,
first responders have contracted lung cancer. So that was a definite correlation. So, and thank God we have a lot of funding that's being given to those people, but I even wonder if they should have started, I don't know I can't talk to it because I don't know exactly what those people were given, but I feel like it was almost not explained to them how toxic the air they were breathing. And they, to me, should have been
the first responders.
Yeah, they should have been getting, annual screenings. And something tells me they probably weren't.
Well, my husband lived right by the site. And filmed, actually.
So he should
the 9/11 event. And so he gets in our mail, we receive notices. I don't know how often, but I'm trying to remember exactly what it says, but it definitely alerted me to the fact that the city is monitoring their health, the health of those who were in the neighborhood and exposed. And
what are they telling him to get CT scans?
I'm kind of wondering if they're suggesting he get tested, but I don't really remember, and I bet he
ignored it.
Yeah, he and I have never talked about it.
Right.
Because I see the mail, put it in his pile, and then we don't really talk about it, but I actually should ask him about it.
Right.
I will add, though, that there is this area called fetal origins where scientists, it's not that studied. The idea has been around for a few decades, but I don't think there's a lot of funding in the area. But increasingly, scientists are studying whether genetic predispositions or adult onset diseases have fetal origins.
Right.
So if you have a parent that was a smoker or a parent that lived around secondhand smoke, then you maybe would be more likely, you might have higher risk.
I know they tested when I did I did genetic testing after. They genetically tested the tumor, and I did have a gene mutation, EGFR. And they can tell from the gene mutation if it was from your original gene or if it was contracted later. So that it must be similar to what you're saying. And mine was not from my original gene, like my original DNA. And as a, whatever, when you're growing, you're like doubling. So they can tell if it came from
like an epigenetic, where like an environmental influence.
It was an environment. It changed it.
Yeah.
So they could tell that from the gene genetic testing. Yes.
Interesting.
So that was the big unveil to tell me that it wasn't from your childhood. It was from something environmental that happened, or something triggered your gene. You mutated. That's how I understand. But people live with gene mutations in their body.
Yes.
And it doesn't necessarily.
You won't die from it.
Right. So
that's right.
I don't know which, some are bad and some are good.
Right.
Right.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if Christina has any questions. Hi, Christina.
Hi. This was just great information for me. And so just to give you a little background about me, I don't have any cancer in my family history, luckily, thankfully, but I kind of started on the journey of just cleaning up, being conscious of my air and cleaning supplies and all of that when I got pregnant with my first child, who's now almost 3. And I just kind of, delved deep into learning what I was putting on my body first, in terms of makeup and hair styling products. And I used EWG, and also another site that, told me, oh my gosh, most of the stuff that I thought was just no big deal was like ranking,
terrible.
7 to 10 even.
Wow.
And so yeah, I've always kind of been health conscious and, tried to eat healthy and exercise, but I didn't know what I didn't know about all the other things that, are that you put on your body or you're breathing in your environment. So anyway, I'm just basically trying to create the most healthy environment for my children possible and for myself, and I think this subject interested me particularly just because I've had, like a nagging cough, I'd say, for about 7 years. And I've even like sore throats, just frequent sore throats. And I've asked my doctor about it, and I've never been checked or scanned or anything, but they just always chop it up to allergies, which I do have. But
I don't think it would hurt to get a scan.
Right. Yeah. So I'm definitely interested when I saw and heard the statistic that it's the number 1 cause of death. And as far as cancer goes, I'm like, okay, this needs to be taken a little more seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
Often your insurance doesn't want to cover it unless the doctor has the right coding or whatever it is. But I would push back on that and really, because for me, because I had it in my family, it was an easy, she was able to easily, I think, get it passed. And then once I had the weird x-ray, but that is, I think when my siblings immediately went to the doctor and got their CT scans. And I know my brother just went straight to the hospital and paid for it. Like for him, if you go and deal directly with the organization, it's actually a lot less than when you go through insurance. So he ended up just going and getting a CT scan. I think it cost him like $300. So he didn't want to wait for insurance and dealing with all that. So that's what he did. He just wanted, my siblings went like that week.
Great.
They wanted to know whether they had it.
Do you have any advice for Christina or anyone else listening when they deal with resistance from insurance companies?
Well, the way it is,
I know every insurance company is different.
But the way the government has set up with the guidelines, you have to be over 70. You have to have smoked for at least 30 years. you have to be currently or have to just quit smoking within the last couple of years. So, I mean, the insurance companies could push back based on the way the government has set up these guidelines. However, if it runs in your family, if you, I think if you say you were environmentally exposed to things, I think your doctor would probably know how to talk to the insurance companies about it. But regardless, you can get a chest x-ray, which is somewhat helpful, but it doesn't always pick up on, it picked up mine, but I don't think it picks up everybody's.
So if your chest x-ray comes back with no red flags, that's great, but it doesn't necessarily mean
it couldn't be. Yes.
Yeah.
I talked to the woman yesterday. I said that I told you about the dry cleaning fluid and how it had metastasized into her hip. And in her chest, the tumor is only 1 centimeter, but it already spread. So it doesn't necessarily correlate to the size of the tumor in your chest before it spreads. So, or your lungs, I should say. So I think you have to be your biggest advocate and just check that off and make sure you're paying attention to that.
Christina, do you feel comfortable saying where do you live in a big city or?
I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico now. Okay. I've been here for about 6 years, but I lived in Washington, D.C. prior to that, and I grew up in the Bay Area. So I have grown up all around pollution.
Right.
Luckily, no one in my family smoked around me, so I don't have, the secondhand smoke issues. But just like you, I smoked in my senior year high school. I never had my own pack of cigarettes. I always kind of bumped cigarettes off of other people, which now I think is a saving grace.
Yes, exactly.
I never bought my own packs, but yeah, I mean, I smoked for maybe a year or two with friends socially. Right. So I do have that in my background.
I honestly, the people I'm meeting that are getting lung cancer now they've never even dabbled in it. So I just think if you feel like you have any sort of worry about it, just have it checked, see if you can just have it checked out, because why not? I just think, why not?
Yeah, I am cautious about radiation exposure as well. So it is just weighing out the pros and cons, but
ask your doctor. But as I was told, when you're at a cancer hospital, they kind of poo-poo radiation.
That's true.
It's no big deal.
Right.
I mean, even the woman that gave me, I had to do a PET scan where you actually take the radiation dye and it lights up the cancer, and you drink sugar water, but they put radiation into your veins. And she was doing it, and she asked my friend my friend had to leave the room so she wasn't exposed. Not that I would touch her, but I think it can go through your body somehow.
Yeah.
And this woman that was doing it for a living, and I said, "Are you worried about it?" And she said, "No, there's actually more radiation that you would get from walking by certain buildings in New York."
Oh, yeah.
So I think, as you said, I think the information on radiation is very vague. And I do think you have to have excessive amounts of radiation for it to have I think that if I had to weigh out the cost and the damage to radiation versus finding out you had cancer early enough.
Right. It's risk reward.
Right.
And I mean, definitely talk to your doctor about it, but an x-ray or a CT scan would give you potentially life-saving information. Right. I mean, to add on to that, I hired this new EMF professional to come measure my home. It's very upsetting. But we're talking about some cell towers on the roofs of building near our children's school. I was really upset about it. But the good news is it turns out that they're pivoted away from the school.
Okay.
Which is good. But then I was talking to him about that, and he said, I would worry, knowing they weren't facing the school, but he said, I'd worry more about the radiation from the Chromebooks the kids get.
Right.
So the point is, there's so many, that's why I believe in the EMF detox, because there's so much stuff you don't benefit from it when you're sleeping.
Right. And you're still living with all of those, I know we now turn our phones off, and I still haven't done the Wi-Fi kill switch. I need to do that.
So
Yeah.
I'll just add this, I mean, maybe you've heard this before, Rena, but I can't help but think of my youngest daughter, who's now 7, but when she was 3 days old, started developing really severe eczema. She had open wounds on her body because she was scratching so much, and it was just bloody, and the clothes would dry to the dry blood and rip off every time we changed her clothes. It was very severe. When I finally took her to a doctor, and I took her to someone at Mount Sinai Hospital, top department, but who did traditional Chinese medicine, she said, look at the inflammation on the outside. Imagine what's going on the inside. And she said 85% of children with eczema end up developing asthma because the inflammation ends up moving to the lungs. Not always, but it's more likely to. So that really was so formative for me. And so, Christina, when you talk about your cough and allergies, I just think of my daughter, and just, I forget with my children because I get busy, but I try and go back to what can be like an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, anti-inflammatory diet, removing the toxins, which you've done in your home, but just thinking about inflammation and how to soothe it.
That's really good. Besides, the environmental piece, what do you suggest as far as reducing inflammation? So diet, and I know having plants and purifying the air as well, I'm sure helps.
I mean, I think in general, having the general philosophy that the more things in your home, the more pollution. So just like doing the editing of your stuff, which I am long over, like it would take me 3 or 4 months to edit all my stuff if I focused on it. But just being really mindful of your indoor air pollution, as we were talking about.
So interesting thing, we were in a house and we ripped out our carpet when I was pregnant. We had all tile floors. We painted with no VOC paints, and I added plants and all of that. I wanted to make my whole environment perfect. But we have sold our house and we're now living in an apartment. And so the one big piece that bothers me is the stove doesn't vent to the outside. The hood doesn't vent to the outside, which I'm sure is pretty common in New York apartments as well.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of cooking. And so I know that that's another exposure. And that's something that's really bothering me, that, I'm breathing in all these fumes every time I cook as well. I'm trying to find kind of a workaround. There's no windows in the kitchen either, but I just open the closest window and I have a fan blowing out.
Do you have an air purifier?
Yes, I have 2 air purifiers. They're Dyson purifiers. I don't know how well they rank in terms of others that you've researched. I know you have recommended ones, and I'm planning to look and see what you recommend.
I haven't looked at Dyson. It might be good, but it sounds like you're doing all you can. I mean, I think air purifiers. I was just looking at how much research there was on indoor air pollution and lung cancer, and there's studies on. I saw some statistic on cooking, women who cook a lot in lung cancer, but it seemed like most of that came from China, where they're cooking with things we don't cook with,
high heat,
in the U.S., even coal or kerosene, or I don't know, so not really relevant to Americans.
Okay.
But you should think about whenever there's something burning, you don't want to it's just risky. And so exercise also is so huge in making your body very strong and resilient. It's interesting. I remember I loved to run. I ran too in my 20s, and I used to live by Central Park. And my father, who is an OBGYN, he's not into it's interesting. He is a kind of a Western mentality.
That's how a lot of.
But he said to me at some point, I don't think you should run outside.
Why?
Even in Central Park, because of the air pollution. And that really surprised me, because he's not someone who worries about environmental things.
Wow.
And So it was very thought-provoking. So I actually did stop. I started running in my indoor gym, but it was not intuitive that running indoors was better than running in Central Park.
But do you think running indoors is better?
I think there are no universal truths. It depends on the indoor gym. It depends on your outdoor air.
Right.
So
I wish we had a monitor that we could monitor the.
There are new devices, and people send me some. I just have to carve out the time to actually learn how to use them and test them out.
Because it would be interesting to find out, oh, is my indoor air better?
There are apps too.
Oh.
But I don't know how effective they are.
Okay. Interesting.
People are working on it though.
Interesting.
Well, please keep us posted, Christina. Do you have any other questions?
Sorry, I was just muted. I definitely will. I'm just excited, I guess, that there's, people talking about this, because this is kind of a newfound interest of mine. It kind of drives my husband nuts, but.
Sophia relates.
You and your testing though, you remind me of my mom. My mother's getting diagnostic testing all the time, and my father's a doctor. He never goes to the doctor. Never gets tested.
I'm of the belief that things are going to happen as you get older, unless you're really blessed with amazing genetics. So if you can prevent things before they get too far along, I think whatever it is, you have a better chance of.
And you're an excellent reminder of that,
right?
Because you found the cancer when it was early,
right?
And you had no symptoms,
right?
So,
and I have a much higher statistic, and it goes literally. I feel like lung cancer, you either hear you have stage 1 or stage 4. You don't really hear stage 2 and 3 very often. It's just either you were really lucky and they caught it because of some other reason they were giving you a test, or it's already spread everywhere, and you have to try to figure out how to combat that, which is not easy. Well, thank you, Christina.
Thank you both very much. Thank you for sharing your story.
And we'd love to hear how it unfolds if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, take care.
Okay, take care as well. Bye-bye.
End meeting.